We're live.
At this time, Sergeant Lugo, please start your recording.
PC started.
Thank you. Recording to cloud is up. Good morning, good afternoon, and welcome to today's remote New York City Council vote for the Committee on Governmental Operations. At this time, will all panelists please turn on their video for verification purposes? And to minimize disruptions, we ask all electronic devices be placed to vibrate or silent mode. Thank you for your cooperation. Chair Cabrera, we are ready to begin.
Thank you so much. I know this has been a long day for all the Sergeant of Arms, so we appreciate all that you do, and to all the staff. Good afternoon. I am Councilmember Fernando Cabrera, Chair of the Committee on Governmental Operation. I wanted to start off by thanking the members of the committee who have joined us today. We have, I see Councilmember Kalos, Councilmember Drum, Councilmember Powers, Councilmember Yeager, Councilmember Dharma Diaz, Councilmember Rodriguez, Councilmember Rosenthal, and I believe that covers everyone. Today the committee will be voting on 3 pieces of legislation. The first is proposed introduction number 1621A, sponsored by Councilmember Daniel Drum. This bill will establish a committee to examine the city's position on nuclear disarmament and issues related to recognizing this city as a nuclear weapons-free zone. The committee will consist of 7 members, 3 of whom will be appointed by the Speaker and 4 of whom, including the chairperson, will be appointed by the mayor. The advisory committee will be required to meet at least 4 times per year and produce an annual report summarizing its findings and conclusions. The committee will dissolve upon the submission of its 5th annual report. Second bill we are voting on today is proposed introduction number 1867A, sponsored by Councilmember Idanis Rodriguez, which relates to non-citizen voting. New York City is a city of immigrants, and immigrants make up close to 40% of the city's population and even larger share of its workforce. Immigrants are a vital part of the city's economic, cultural, and civic landscape. This bill will allow certain immigrants who are not yet U.S. citizens to vote in municipal elections. The bill will create a new class of voters called municipal voters. Municipal voter will be any individual who is, number 1, not a U.S. citizen, number 2, either a lawful permanent resident or authorized to work in the U.S., number 3, has been a resident of New York City for at least 30 consecutive days, 4, meet all the qualifications for registering to vote under the election law other than U.S. citizenship, and 5th, has registered to vote as a municipal voter with the Board of Election. Municipal voters will be able to vote in any election for mayor, controller, public advocate, board president, or council member, or any other city ballot initiative. Municipal voters will not be authorized to vote in any state or federal election. The Board of Election will be tasked with implementing the bill. Among other things, the BOE will be required to create a new voter registration form, an absentee ballot application to be used by municipal voters, and provide informational notices to municipal voters about the law. The BOE will be prohibited from requiring municipal voters to form a separate line or vote in a separate location. The bill will also include privacy protections for municipal voters. Finally, the bill will create an advisory group that will provide recommendations regarding any problems or potential improvement with respect to the municipal voting process. The advisory group will be made up of 5 members chaired by the public advocate. There will be 4 representatives of the community-based organizations, 2 appointed by the mayor and 2 by the Speaker of the Council. Third and final bill we are voting on today is proposed introduction number 2459A, sponsored by Councilmember Oswald Felix. And as I know, I believe this is his very first bill, so congratulations. This bill will make the Mayor's Office on Information Privacy a charter-mandated office headed by the city's chief private officer. The Office of Information Privacy works to safeguard the New Yorkers' information while facilitating data sharing across city agency. By codifying this office, this bill will ensure that the city remains well equipped to respond to the latest developments in information, privacy, and data collection. And with that, I want to thank Council Members Drum, Rodriguez, and Feliz for their leadership on this bill. I also want to thank our committee staff, CJ Mary and Sebastian Bacci, for the work on this hearing. Finally, I want to thank my own legislative director, Clark Pena, for his assistance. I will now turn it over to my colleague, Councilmember Drum, to say a few words about his bill, followed by Councilmember Idanis Rodriguez.
Thank you very much, Chair Cabrera. Before I start with my remarks about my legislation, I do want to congratulate Councilmember Feliz on his first piece of legislation. That's great. Many more, I hope, as you move forward in your tenure in the City Council. I also want to congratulate Councilmember Idanis Rodriguez for moving forward the non-citizen voting rights bill. That's something that I carried for a number of years, but when I became chair of the Finance Committee, I asked Councilmember Rodriguez if he could take the leadership on that, and he has done a stellar job and moved it forward, and it looks like we're going to get this passed and we're going to finally get this done. So thank you, Councilmember Rodriguez, for your leadership on that legislation. In regards to my legislation, the Committee on Civil Service and Labor just passed my resolution 976A regarding divestment from nuclear arms, so I will refer everyone to those remarks. I do, however, want to highlight some of the key points of Intro 1621A. This bill would require the city to convene an advisory committee on nuclear disarmament and a nuclear-free zone, chaired by an agency or office head, and composed of 6 experts on nuclear disarmament policy and advocacy. This committee would review the city's current stance on nuclear weapons and draft a resolution declaring support for the city to remain a nuclear-free zone. Outreach and education would be vital components of the committee's work, which would be detailed in 5 years of annual reports. If the advocates for the bill are any indicator, then I know that the advisory committee members will be excellent, and I very much look forward to reading each report and then seeing the city act to implement the recommendations. For the record, I want to recognize the advocates who have fought so hard for the passage of this legislation. Kathleen Sullivan, Matthew Bolton, Sean Shelstein, Seth Sheldon, Robert Kuhnkrist, and all the others who supported this effort. I especially want to recognize my good friend, human rights activist Brendan Fay, who first discussed with me ideas about how our city could support nuclear disarmament. And also, let me thank Irish Consul General Helene Nolan, who was the lead negotiator on nuclear disarmament in the United Nations when they passed their resolution as well on nuclear disarmament. Finally, I want to acknowledge you, Chair Cabrera. It has been a pleasure to work with you. I hope that we get the opportunity to work again at some point in the future. And I thank you for your leadership, and council staff who worked on this, namely Brendan McKinney and CJ Murray. Thank you also for your work. I am most grateful to all of you. Thank you again, Chair Cabrera.
Thank you so much, Councilman Drum. Congratulations. I know you worked very, very hard on this bill, and the advocates, they're amazing. They never cease work toward the bill. So I salute you and the advocates as well. And so with that, let me turn it over now to the next sponsor of the following bill, and that is Councilmember Rodriguez.
Thank you, Chairman Cabrera, for your leadership, not only on this committee, but with many of the things that we've been able to do in our city. And thank you for being also a sponsor of the municipal voting right, as also as Councilmember John, and having conversation with him this morning, Margaret Shane. For me, this is a day full of emotion, because this is about going back to 2009, when you like there carry on the bill, this bill had three main prime, and we are Councilmember Drum, Councilmember Margaret Chen, myself, together with the rest of the colleagues, Councilmember Menchaca, and all of us that are determined to write another chapter of this history. When we passed the bill of emancipation, there was a lot of doubt about what could be the future, what will happen after, individuals that were denied their right now will be seen and treated as human beings. So the same doubt, I know that is also in the head with a lot of people. What will happen with 1 million New Yorkers who will stay here during COVID? I don't think that anyone that have not lived that experience, like the one that I did, with green card from 83 to 2000, washing dishes at O. Henry restaurant, working in a factory. Yes, I wanted to be citizen, but my language didn't allow me to be fluent. There's so many of those people here. They stay working daily. They stay being delivering food, working in supermarkets they've been living in the shadow. A lot of people running for citywide office. They don't spend time in those communities because they see those people as second and third class citizens. They deserve to have a voice. We used to allow New Yorkers that were not citizens to vote 150 years ago. And we started changing when new immigrants were coming. They were Irish, they were Italian, they were Jewish, it's not just Black or Latino. And for me, it's important that everyone to recognize this bill will not dilute the power of anyone. This bill will strengthen. Chairman, Carrera, anyone go to Sheridan Avenue and 167 is full of a lot of people from Nigeria. Go to Brooklyn and you see also a lot of people from Nigeria. Go to Queens, you see people from Bangladesh, from India, working so hard. People coming from the former Soviet Union, from Latin America. So now this is not about Latinos. This is not about Asian. This is about hundreds and thousands of Irish that they came here undocumented. They come with they get the working permits later on. So I'm appealing to my colleagues to see outside the box. We had the opportunity to follow Tacoma Park. They've been doing since the 1990s. Speaking to the former chairman of the DNC, Tom Perez, he said, in my town, we did it in the 90s. It's been working perfectly. We can do in the city of New York. City of New York can be a role model, going to Texas and let those Trump supporters know we are not following you, but we follow New York City. We are going to be strengthening the vote. So with that, I'm sorry for my emotion, but for me, this is about, it's a day where we had the opportunity. Women had the right to vote in 1919, because before that, it was white men that had land, that had the right to do it. Each generation had the opportunity to expand and amend our charter, our constitution. New York State Constitution never used the word only when they say citizens have the right to vote. And that's why academics and lawyers, including the law department in New York City, including the legislation division led by Paul Ochoa from Mayor de Blasio, they revised this bill, including the council lawyer, the advocate. So this bill has been written, have been allowed by lawyers of the council to go and have hearing in 3 occasions. The first thing that we go through as a council member is that when we put an LS request, we got feedback back. And we've been told, well, you can do it or you cannot do it. lawyers have revised our LS request and they say you can do it. This is the moment. Let's make history. Let's vote for this vote. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Danny. You've been so great. And for me, I'm just adding what I'm doing with the work that you already started as Margaret Chen too. Thank you, and I'm sorry.
Nothing to be sorry about, Council Member. Your feelings are fully understood. I know this is a very emotional bill for you. I've seen you fight for this bill, and with all of your heart, and of course, Councilmember Drum for being the catalyst there from the very beginning. It's so unselfish to be able to share it with another council member. So I know this is a very important moment for both of you. And with that, I believe Councilmember Yeager has some comments.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to Councilman Rodriguez, who's worked very hard on this bill, as he said, for a very long time, and to all the folks who have been working on this topic for a very long time. I've spoken a lot in this council, on the floor of this council, and here in committees about my own family history, which doesn't need to be necessarily recited today, but for purposes of my explanation, I think it is relevant. I, too, am not a descendant of people who came here on the Mayflower or of Native Americans. My father came here on a boat with his parents and his older brother. All four of my grandparents came here after, in different ways, having escaped the atrocities of Nazi Germany. My mother's father was able to make his way to Japan, ultimately to China, where he resided for several years, and then here to the United States. None of them were citizens when they came here, and ultimately they became citizens. And today, their grandchild, the grandchild and the son of immigrants, is a member of the New York City Council, one of 51 who have this title. I imagine that if they were here today, they'd be wondering how that all happened, but they would also know that it's the blessing of God that created this great country, that gave the right of citizenship, and that enabled us to be a part of this American miracle of democracy, the longest serving democracy, the longest existing democracy in the history of the world. For me, and my colleagues have heard me say this many times, and it's one of the reasons I have the highest number of no votes of any member of the council from any party. I take my oath of office seriously. And to me, that means supporting the Constitution of the United States, supporting the Constitution of the state of New York. That's what's in our oaths. And I took that same oath several years before when I was sworn in as an attorney. An oath to support, to honor the Constitution of this state. The Constitution of this state, in my estimation, and in a very simple reading, limits voting to citizens. Now, that doesn't mean that it can't be changed. It only means that we can't change it. We, the city council, can't change it. It can be changed. It can be changed by the state legislature, submitted to the voters can adopt it, and that would be the law. This is not a message of that it would be bad for more people to be enfranchised. My grandparents were enfranchised. I'm looking around this committee and I see many people whose grandparents could not vote. Blacks, women who are here in this room today, who have the right to vote in this legislature, who couldn't vote, whose grandparents couldn't vote because they were denied that right. The denying of a right to vote is not right. It's not proper. It's inconsistent with a democracy. But the question is whether or not we are legally allowed to do it. And the answer to that is no, we can't. And there are many reasons why, and ultimately when the courts strike this law down, because it will be voted out of committee today and will be voted off the floor tomorrow, it will be very clear why, but I'll say some of them. The idea that we can do something just because it's right, just because it makes sense, just because it feels good, and then walk away and say we did our jobs, it's not what our job is. I don't believe it. I don't believe that it is consistent with our oath. And it's not a criticism of anybody who's worked on this. Councilman Rodriguez, with whom I've served for 4 years, less about 20 and change days, has been a tremendous advocate for this. It's not about a particular segment of the community. He listed the different potential voting blocks, and he's right. It wouldn't be limited to one particular segment. It would be everybody who has this right granted by the statute, as long as the statute is legal. But the statute's not legal. We'll hear a lot in the discussion about the words, floor versus ceiling as it relates to the words in the Constitution when it talks about citizen. That the fact that it says citizen means that the Constitution set a floor that's who must be granted the right to vote, but it's not limited to that group of people, the citizens, the right to vote. And that's just not true. And it's not consistent with very basic statutory interpretation. There's an old Latin phrase that courts use when they interpret statutes, expressio unios, exclusio ulterios. And the very basic meaning of that is, and my Latin is not as good as it used to be, is that when a statute or a constitution or a law or an ordinance or a rule or a regulation says something and it excludes other things in that category, it necessarily has excluded them to the exclusion of being used. Therefore, when it says citizen and it doesn't say resident, that's what it means. Now, how do we know that for sure? The Constitution actually uses the word resident in many different places, particularly, for example, in the makeup of the Independent Redistricting Commission, and that it has to take into account the residents of New York as excluded and as differentiated from the citizens of New York. Because when legislative seats are designed, they are not designed simply around citizens, they're designed around residents. So the Constitution is pretty clear that citizens are the ones who are granted the right to vote exclusively. Again, it can be changed, and perhaps it ought to be, but not by us. And that's why I'm voting no today, and I'm doing that with great respect for the advocates who believe in this, for the people who believe that this is right. And for those who will ultimately take the oath of citizenship at some point in the future, and who will have journeyed on a quest to become a citizen of this country, they ought to know that the oath to the Constitution has meaning. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you so much. And with that, let me pass it on now to Councilmember Menchaca. See if he stands raised.
Thank you, Chair. And I want to speak on our city, our vote. It's a bill that is important to me and many members in my community who have been championing this larger conversation about enfranchising more immigrants. I want to say thank you to Danny Drum, our incredible 12-year fighter for immigrants, and Idanis Rodriguez, who has been leading the fight on this bill. But there's a lot of internal conversation right now in the City Council that is trying to stop this bill. And I want to address some of those issues, but I think what I want to do is bring it back to what Councilmember Yeager just brought up in terms of the Constitution and what the Constitution has given us as cities. This city, the City of New York, and its charter is an incredibly powerful charter. Our City Council legal teams have looked at this and have answered the question of whether or not we have the power to do it. Now, the pushback will be, and I'm not saying Councilmember Yeager is anti-immigrant, I'm not saying this, but there will be proponents out there that will try to knock this out and make some of the same arguments that Councilmember Yeager is making. What I want to make sure that we know is that this committee, I don't have a vote on this committee, but the council itself must bring this up on Thursday and vote, and let your vote speak for itself, and ensure that we can actually move forward to implement this, because this is not going to be an easy implementation. This is going to require a very kind of new thinking for a city like ours, but it is important to enfranchise some of the most vulnerable people, our working families across many immigrant constituencies that deserve the ability to choose their leader to make their lives better. And I saw this through participatory budgeting. That is where I saw the beginnings of how we can enfranchise people in a neighborhood to make decisions that they want. And so I'm here to speak in favor of that. I want to say thank you to everyone who's voting yes on this. And Chair, thank you so much for not just hearing this, but you've been there along the way. And I want to say thank you on behalf of the communities that I represent, that we all represent. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Councilmember Menchaca. Thank you for your words. And I know we have a lot of votes today, so I don't see any other hands raised. So with that, let me turn it over to the clerk to call the roll.
Thank you. Good afternoon. William Martin, Committee Clerk. Roll call vote, Committee on Governmental Operations. All three items are coupled. Chair Cabrera.
I vote aye.
Thank you. Rodriguez.
I vote aye, dedicándoselo a todas las personas inmigrantes que hacen historia trabajando en esta ciudad para hacer de Nueva York un Nueva York lleno de oportunidades para todos. Thank you.
Thank you. Levin.
I want to congratulate Councilmember Rodriguez on this watershed bill. And congratulations as well to Councilmember Drum. And with that, I vote aye on all.
Thank you. Kalos. Thank you. Powers.
I vote aye.
Thank you. Yeager.
Mr. Chairman, may I be excused to explain my vote?
Absolutely.
Thank you. I'm not going to reiterate my comments on Introduction 1867. I'll save that for our exciting day tomorrow. I will very briefly just explain my vote on Introduction 1621. I too, like most reasoned people, reasoned-thinking people, abhor the existence of nuclear weapons. They're not safe, and they have historically been used in ways that have made the world unsafe. It would be a great day if there were no nuclear weapons. But as I said before, and along the same lines of thinking, I have tended to vote in this council the way I believe our structure of government requires, which is that we can't ban nuclear weapons from the city council. We are not the military of the United States. We're not the president of the United States. We're not the United States Congress. We are a local body. If this bill were just to create a commission to discuss it, to make recommendations, to have a thought process, that's fine. But ultimately, the bill is designed in a way that says, and we here in New York City say no nukes in New York. It's great as a target, as a goal, as an ideal to be achieved. But again, not our job, not our role, not our right, not within the oath of office that we took. Because, however, the achievement of that goal is valid and valuable, I'm not going to vote no on Intro 1621. I will, however, abstain, withhold my vote from voting yes on that matter because of the thoughts as I've described them. I'm voting no on 1867, as I've described before, and I'm voting yes on Councilman Feliz's bill, and I congratulate him on moving this. He has quickly proven himself to be a wise and thoughtful colleague of ours, and I'm grateful for his service and his partnership, and looking forward to continuing serving with him. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Thank you. Dharma Diaz.
I'd like to explain one of my votes, please.
Yes, absolutely.
In reference to 1867A, I'm voting yes, but I want it on the record that I'm conflicted. The Board of Elections of the City of New York is in dire need of getting themselves together in order. As a former district leader, I can go on in the negative on how elections are impacted by the lack of staffing, the lack of technology, and the lack of order. I'm voting yes on all, but just wanted it on the record. And I'm hoping that as we move forward, if we move forward tomorrow, that we figure out a way to bring the Board of Elections up to code and up to standards. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Results for the following items. Proposed introduction 2459A is adopted by the committee with a vote of 7 in the affirmative, 0 in the negative, and no abstentions. Proposed introduction 1867A is adopted by the committee with 6 in the affirmative, 1 in the negative, and no abstentions. And proposed introduction 1621A is adopted by the committee with 6 in the affirmative, 0 in the negative, and 1 abstention.
Thank you so much. Congratulations to all of the sponsors of the bill. And with that, we adjourn today's meeting.
Thank you, Chairman.